384. Symbiosis between clams and crabs. In the East Sea, there is a type of clam. When it's hungry, it swims to the shore, opens its two shells, and a small crab crawls out from inside. The crab is tied with a very thin red thread. It can leave the clam a few feet away to find food. After eating its fill, it climbs back, and only then do the clam's shells close. If someone secretly cuts the red thread on the crab, both the clam and the crab will die together. This is also a marvel in the natural world. There is actually a species of crab called Pinnatheridae dahan that lives inside the shell of a mollusk. 385. In Zhengde Prefecture, Henan, there was a scholar named Lian who was diligent and studious from a young age. However, he lost his father at an early age and his family was very poor. One day, Lian went out and got lost on his way home in the evening. He walked into a village where an old lady came over and asked, "Where is Master Lian going? Isn't it very late at night?" Lian, who was panicking and scared, didn't have time to ask who the old lady was and asked for a place to stay. The old lady led him into a large mansion. A maid was carrying a lantern, leading a woman out who was about 40 years old and had the demeanor of a lady. The old lady stepped forward and said, "Master Lian is here." Lian quickly stepped forward to pay his respects, and the woman happily said, "The young master is handsome and elegant, not just a rich man." She then set up a banquet, and the woman sat on the side, frequently urging him to drink, but she herself never drank from her cup or ate from her chopsticks. Lian felt anxious and repeatedly inquired about her family background. The woman laughed and said, "My late husband's surname was Liu. He lived in Jiangxi, and he suddenly died due to an unexpected change. I, a widow, live alone in this desolate place, and my family is also increasingly declining. Although I have 2 grandsons, they are either as few and untamed as owls, or as stupid and incompetent as nags. Although you and I have different surnames, you are also a close relative of a generation, and you are honest and sincere by nature, so I took the liberty to meet you. There is nothing else to trouble you. I have a few taels of silver. I would like you to take it to the rivers and lakes to do business. Get a part of the profit. It is much better than reading hard and dying poor like a firefly on the case." Lian declined, saying that he was young and a bookworm, and he was afraid that he would fail her trust. Mrs. Liu said, "If you plan to study hard, you must first solve the problem of livelihood. The young master is very smart. Where can he go?" So she ordered the maid to take out the silver and handed over more than 800 taels in person. Lian was very scared and declined again and again. Mrs. Liu said, "I know you are not used to doing business, but try it. I think it will not be unsuccessful." Lian was worried that he could not handle so much money by himself and planned to find a partner to do business together. Mrs. Liu said, "No need, just find a simple and cautious servant who understands business, and it will be enough for the young master to run errands." So she stretched out her slender finger and calculated a hexagram, saying, "Find someone with the surname Wu for good luck." She then ordered the servant to prepare a horse, loaded the silver, and sent Lian off, saying, "At the end of the 12th lunar month, I will clean the cups and dishes and wait to wash the dust for the young master." She turned her head and said to the servant, "This horse has been well trained and can be ridden, so give it to the young master. Don't lead it back." Mr. Lian returned home just before dawn, and as soon as he arrived, the servant tied up the horse and went back on his own. The next day, Mr. Lian searched extensively for a partner, and indeed found someone surnamed Wu, so he hired him at a high price. Mr. Wu had been traveling for many years and was known for his honesty and diligent work. Mr. Lian entrusted all his money to him. The two traveled around the Jingxiang area and returned at the end of the year, realizing a 3-fold profit. Grateful for Mr. Wu's assistance, Mr. Lian not only paid him wages, but also gave him additional rewards. They discussed secretly adding this extra money to other accounts so that their employer wouldn't find out. Upon their return home, Mrs. Liu had already sent someone to welcome them, so they went to her house together with the messenger. They found a sumptuous feast prepared in the hall. Mrs. Liu came out and repeatedly expressed her gratitude for their hard work. After Mr. Lian handed over the money, he presented the account book to Mrs. Liu, who put it aside without looking at it. Soon everyone sat down to eat, accompanied by music and dancing. In the outer room, a feast was set up for Mr. Wu to ensure he drank enough to get drunk before leaving. Since Mr. Lian had no family, he stayed at Mrs. Liu's house to celebrate the new year. The next day, Mr. Lian requested to inspect the accounts and take inventory of the assets again. Mrs. Liu smiled and said, "There's no need for that anymore. I have already calculated everything." She then took out a ledger and showed it to Mr. Lian. The records were very detailed, even including the rewards he had given to the servant. "Mr. Lian exclaimed in amazement, "Madam, you truly are extraordinary." Mr. Lian stayed for a few days, and Mrs. Liu took care of his accommodations and meals extravagantly, treating him as if he were her own nephew. One day, Mrs. Liu arranged a banquet in the hall, with one table facing east, one facing south, and one facing west below the hall. Mrs. Liu said to Mr. Lian, "Tomorrow is an auspicious day for travel. Today we are hosting this banquet for you and your servant to send you off in style, making your journey even more impressive." After a while, she also called for Mr. Wu's assistant to join them and sit at the table below the hall. Drums and gongs sounded, and a female performer presented a list of songs. Mr. Lian chose to perform Tao Ju Fu. Mrs. Liu smiled and said, "This is a good sign. You will surely find a wife as virtuous as she." After the banquet, Mrs. Liu handed over all the assets to Mr. Lian again, saying, "This time, there is no time limit for your journey. Don't come back until you have made a huge profit. We rely on luck and fate, and I trust you completely. You don't need to worry about calculating your gains and losses abroad. I will know." Mr. Lian thanked her and took his leave. They both went to the Huai River region to engage in trade and became salt merchants. After a year, they made several times the profit. However, Mr. Lian loved reading and never forgot about his books even while doing business. His friends were also all scholars. Since he had already made a lot of profit, Mr. Lian decided to retire gradually from business and handed over the heavy responsibility of trading to Mr. Wu's assistant. There was a scholar named Shui in Taoyuan County who was Mr. Lian's closest friend. Once, when Mr. Lian went to visit him, the entire Shui family had gone to their villa. It was already dark, and Mr. Lian couldn't go anywhere else, so the gatekeeper invited him in and treated him with hospitality, making the bed and cooking for him. Mr. Lian inquired in detail about his host's situation. It turned out that there were rumors spreading at that time that the court was going to select virtuous girls from good families and send them to the border to reward the soldiers, causing a stir among the people. Whenever they heard of unmarried young men, they didn't bother with matchmakers or engagement ceremonies, but directly sent their daughters to their homes. Some even got 2 daughters-in-law overnight. Mr. Shui had recently married a daughter from a prominent family, and fearing that the matter would cause a commotion and be known to the county magistrate, he had temporarily moved to the countryside. When the first watch of the night was about to end, Lian was tidying up his bed, preparing to sleep, when he suddenly heard several people pushing open the front door and coming straight in. The gatekeeper said something that Lian couldn't hear, but he heard one person say, "If the master is not at home, then who is the one with the light on in the house?" The gatekeeper replied, "It's Master Lian, a guest from afar." After a while, the person who had asked the question came into the room. This person was neatly dressed and elegant. He greeted Lian with a slight raise of his hand and then inquired about his family background. Lian told him, and he happily said, "We are fellow villagers. What is your father-in-law's surname?" Lian replied, "I am not yet married." This person was even more delighted, and he quickly called another young man to come in and greet Lian with great respect. He suddenly said, "To tell you the truth, our surname is Mu. We came here tonight to bring my sister to marry Mr. Shui, but when we got here, we found out that this matter could not be done. At a loss whether to advance or retreat, we happened to meet you. Isn't this fate?" Lian, not knowing these two people, hesitated and dared not agree. Mu didn't listen to what he said and quickly called the people who were accompanying the bride. After a while, 2 old women led a young girl in and sat her on Lian's bed. Lian glanced at her out of the corner of his eye. The girl was about 15 or 16 years old and was extremely beautiful, unmatched by anyone. Lian was very happy, and then he tidied up his clothes and thanked Mu. He also instructed the gatekeeper to go buy some wine to show a little bit of hospitality. Mu said, "Our ancestors were also from Zhengde Prefecture. My mother's family was also a family of officials for generations, but now it has declined. I heard that my maternal grandfather left 2 grandsons. I don't know how their family situation is." Lian asked, "Who is your maternal grandfather?" Mu said, "My maternal grandfather's surname is Liu, and his courtesy name is Hui Ruo. I heard that he lives 30 miles north of the city." Lian said, "I am from the southeast of the prefecture city, far from the north. I am young and have a narrow circle of acquaintances. There are many people in the county with the surname Liu. I only know that there is a Liu Jingqing in the north of the city, who is also a scholar. I don't know if he is a descendant of your maternal grandfather, but his family is already very poor." Mu said, "Our family's ancestral tomb is still in Zhengde Prefecture. We often think about sending our parents' coffins back to our hometown for burial, but because we haven't raised enough money for the journey, we have been unable to do so. Now that my sister is married to you, our intention to return home is decided." Lian listened and readily agreed to help them with this matter. The Mu brothers were very happy, and after a few rounds of drinks they said goodbye and left. Lian sent away the servant, moved away the lamp, and then began to enjoy the love between the newlywed couple, which was indescribable in words. The next day Shui had already heard about this matter, so he rushed to the city, collected and moved out another courtyard for Lian to live in. Lian returned to Liaozhai, and after the transfer and inventory were completed, he left a clerk with the surname Wu to live in the shop, and he himself packed up his belongings and returned to Taoyuan County. He and the Mu brothers exhumed the bones of his parents-in-law, took the wives and children of both families, and returned to Zhengde together. After settling down at home, Lian packed up the silver to see the master. The servant who had sent him before was already waiting for him on the road. Lian followed him to Liu's house. Mrs. Liu came out to meet him, her face full of joy, and said, "Tao Zhugong has brought Shishi back. Before you were a guest, today you are my grandson-in-law." She set up a banquet to welcome him and wash the dust off him, and she was doubly affectionate towards Lian. Lian admired Mrs. Liu for her foresight and asked, "How close or distant is the relationship between the lady and my mother-in-law?" Mrs. Liu said, "Don't ask about this. You will know in time." So Mrs. Liu piled the silver on the case, divided it into 5 parts, and took 2 parts herself, saying, "I don't need the silver for anything. It's just for my eldest grandson." Lian, because it was too much, declined to accept it. Mrs. Liu was very upset and said, "Our family has declined. The trees in the courtyard have been cut down for firewood. The grandson is quite far from here. The courtyard is in ruins. I hope the young master can manage it." Lian agreed, but only agreed to take half of the silver. Mrs. Liu forced Lian to take all of it, sent him out the door, and went back crying. Just as Lian was feeling puzzled and strange, he looked back and saw that the mansion had become a cemetery. Then he understood that Mrs. Liu was his wife's maternal grandmother. After returning home, Lian used his silver to buy a piece of land around the tomb as a cemetery, planted trees, and decorated it to be grand and beautiful. Mrs. Liu had 2 grandsons. The eldest grandson was Liu Jingqing. The second grandson was named Yu Qing, who was addicted to alcohol and gambling and did not have a proper job. Both brothers were very poor. The brothers went to Lian's house to thank him for repairing their ancestral tomb, and Lian gave them a large sum of silver. From then on, they interacted with each other most closely. Once, Lian told them in detail about the reasons for doing business. Yu Qing secretly thought that there must be a lot of silver in the tomb, so one night he gathered a few gamblers, dug up the tomb, and searched for silver. When the coffin was opened and the body was exposed, they didn't get any silver at all, and they dispersed in disappointment. When Lian knew that the tomb had been dug, he informed Jingqing. Jingqing and Lian went to the tomb to check together. When they entered the tomb, they saw that the case was full, and the 2 portions of silver that had been divided before were there. Jingqing wanted to divide the silver with Lian, and Lian said, "The lady originally stayed here, waiting to give it to you." Jingqing transported the silver back home and then reported the matter of digging the tomb to the government. The government's investigation and arrest were very strict. Later, someone sold a jade hairpin from the tomb and was caught. The government interrogated and asked his accomplices and found out that it was Yu Qing who was the leader. The county magistrate wanted to execute Yu Qing with the most severe punishment. Jingqing pleaded for him and only spared him from death. The two families worked together to repair and decorate the inside and outside of the tomb to be more solid and beautiful than before. Since then, both Lian and Jingqing's families have become rich, and only Yu Qing is still as poor as before. Lian and Jingqing often helped him, but in the end, it was not enough for him to squander in gambling. One night, several robbers broke into Lian Sheng's house and caught him, demanding silver. The silver collected by Lian Sheng was all cast into silver ingots of 1,500 taels each, and he dug some out for them. The robbers took 2 ingots. At that time, only the horse that Mrs. Liu had given to Lian Sheng was in the stable. The robbers used it to carry the silver away and forced Lian Sheng to guide them to the outskirts of the village before releasing him. The villagers saw the robbers' torches not far away and shouted, chasing after them. The robbers, scared, fled, leaving the silver on the side of the road. The horse had already fallen to the ground and turned into ashes. Lian then realized that the horse was also a ghost. Only 1 gold bracelet was lost that night. It turned out that the robbers had caught Lian's wife, and one robber, wearing a mask, scolded the others loudly to stop them from harming her. The voice sounded like Yu Qing's. The robbers released Lian's wife, taking only the gold bracelet from her wrist before leaving. Lian suspected it was Yu Qing, but felt secretly grateful to him. Later, a robber used the gold bracelet as a bet and was caught by an arresting officer. When questioned, it was revealed that Yu Qing was indeed involved. The county magistrate was furious and used all 5 kinds of severe punishments on Yu Qing. Yu Qing's brother and Lian discussed bribing the government heavily to spare him from the death penalty, but before they could act, Yu Qing had already died. Lian still often took care of and helped Yu Qing's wife and children. Lian later passed the provincial examination and became a scholar, and his family remained wealthy for generations. Alas, the dots, strokes, and images of the word tan, greed, are very close to the word pin, poor. People like Yu Qing serve as a lesson for the future.